Hi guys, welcome back again for another WSQ. Today we're going to be looking at the progressive era. As you watch the video, make sure that you answer the guided questions provided. You may need to pause or rewatch the video in order to answer the guided questions. When the video ends, summarize the main points of the video in paragraph form. Make sure that you use the specific vocabulary given to you on your WSQ sheet. These will appear as bolded and underlined words during the video. Then I want you to finish by asking one question. This can be something that you're still confused about, a general question, or a discussion question for the class. The essential question that we're going to be answering during this video is, how did progressive reformers respond to political corruption, economic instability, and social concerns? And then Spartan historians will evaluate the extent to which progressive reformers were successful at changing American society through government action and other political and social measures. Progressivism is a reform movement that arose in the late 1800s to address many of the social problems that industrialization created. Essentially, progressivism is a movement of change. The progressives were questioning the power and the practices of the big businesses like Carnegie and Rockefeller, and they also call for the government to be more helpful to the public's needs and more attentive to what the public was really just needing. Writers called the muckrakers, these are journalists, were the first to start exposing the issues that the progressives addressed. Upton Sinclair, Jacob Riis, and Ida Tarbell were some of the most famous muckrakers. Upton Sinclair famously wrote the novel The Jungle, all about the nastiness that was occurring in the meatpacking industry. In The Jungle, he talks about how the rat's poop, the rat poison, and other nasty things that appeared in the meatpacking districts were all put into the hoppers together when they ground up the meat. This eventually leads to the passage of the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act that standardized all food and drug and created the FDA. Jacob Riis was a journalist and a photographer in New York City, and he wanted to make sure that people knew what the immigrants and the poor were going through. He wrote a book called How the Other Half Lives. Ida Tarbell was the leading woman in the muckraking movement, and she wrote a book all about Rockefeller and the history of Standard Oil, exposing the unfair practices and really exposing him as a robber baron. There are three main issues that progressives address. Housing, racism, and anti-Semitism are some of these. The Tenement Act of 1901 focused on the social issues of the poor in the tenements. Ida Wells Barnett, W.E.B. Du Bois, and James Adams formed the NAACP that fought for the rights of African Americans. Anti-Semitism is a hostility towards Jews, and the Anti-Defamation League was started by Sigmund Livingston in order to fight anti-Jewish sentiments. While mere workers are being taken care of by the labor unions, many women workers were still abused by their employers. Mulder v. Oregon upheld a state law to establish a 10-hour workday for women in the laundries and the factories. They believed that long hours were harmful for the health of women, especially women who were pregnant and had to be on their feet all day. In 1911, there was a fire at a garment factory where there was a lot of women working to create clothing. The Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire led to the establishment of conditions and fire safety rules. Over 140 women were killed. In the picture on the right, you can see the girls that had jumped out of the windows just to try to escape. The doors to the building had been locked, locking them inside while they worked. New labor unions also emerged in addition to the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor to create better working conditions for workers. The International Ladies Garment Workers Union focused mainly on women and allowed unskilled laborers to join. They won a shorter work week and higher wages. The Industrial Workers of the World, or the IWW, founded in 1905, really opposed capitalism and was a more radical organization. Radical meaning that they went against the regular ideas of America. They also used tactics such as sabotage. The government shut it down eventually because they felt like it was too revolutionary. There was also a movement in society against alcohol. Prohibition was a progressive area movement that called for the ban on making, selling, and distributing alcoholic beverages, meaning that no one could make alcohol, could sell alcohol, or could transport alcohol over state lines. They believed that alcohol was the reason for crime, poverty, and violence against women and children, and they often associated it with the new immigrants. The Women's Christian Temperance Union and the Anti-Saloon League led the crusade against alcohol, hoping that they would be able to get rid of alcohol altogether, and they eventually did through the 18th Amendment. African American women formed their own organizations because they were not welcome in other organizations due to racism. The National Association of Colored Women campaigned against poverty, segregation, and lynching and fought for equal rights for African American women. The settlement house movement is kind of the center of the progressive era movement. Settlement houses were houses where immigrants could be taught skills, such as English or job skills that would eventually help them out of poverty. It also provided social activities such as clubs and sports and taught women how to cook. The first settlement house was founded by Jane Addams and was called Hull House in Chicago. Many settlement workers were middle-class women that were college educated, and they believed in the social gospel. The social gospel was a belief that religious faith should be expressed through good works, especially good works to the poor. They felt as Christians that they had a moral obligation to help solve society's problems. Social Darwinists are those people who believed that there was survival of the fittest and that the poor were just going to always be poor, really criticized the social gospel movement, believing that no one should really help them out of poverty. The women's abolitionist movement also really springboarded out of the progressive era movement. Many women were working in the progressive reforms and gaining a lot of political traction, and so they decided to focus on their own voting rights. Women abolitionists believed that they should have been included in the 15th Amendment. However, the 15th Amendment only included men. Susan B. Anthony formed the National Women's Suffrage Association to encourage a constitutional amendment for women's rights to vote. They made speeches, made pamphlets before Congress trying to ensure that they would get the right to vote. In 1875, the Supreme Court ruled that even though women are citizens, citizenship does not automatically give them the right to vote. They knew that they were going to need an amendment in order to gain the right. The National American Women's Suffrage Organization, Nassau, was formed in 1890 under Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Many of the original suffragettes back from the late 1800s were not still alive when women gained the right to vote. There was a lot more opportunities for women at the turn of the century. Women were now able to attend college, but this opportunity is really only available for middle or upper class women that could afford the opportunity. There were very few professional jobs available for women during this time, and instead women put their skills to use in reform movements. They advocated for different groups and societies and led movements that they felt passionate about. There's more jobs for middle-class women and teachers or nurses or secretaries, and even more jobs available for lower-class women in industries. But in these industries, they were still paid less than males. Women begin to see their role in society outside of the home in addition to as their role as a mother or a wife. By 1901, 4 Western states had given women the right to vote, and some women still felt like Nassau and the other organizations were not doing enough to secure women's suffrage. Alice Paul, one of the most radical suffragettes, and Lucy Burns formed the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage, and they later renamed this the National Women's Party. They really wanted to focus on the passage of a constitutional amendment because they knew that that was the only way that they were going to get the right to vote. They picketed the White House and chained themselves to the railing, often going to jail to try to support women's voting. Nassau renewed their efforts for the right to vote as well. Eventually, the 19th Amendment is passed in 1920, giving women full voting rights. African Americans are often left out of the progressive era movement. Roosevelt was the first American president to entertain an African American at the White House. He invited Booker T. Washington. However, his efforts to make African Americans more equal in society were set back with the Brownsville incident, when 12 members of an African American infantry, the Army, were accused of going on a shooting spree in a town. Roosevelt said that if no one had accepted responsibility, they would all be dishonorably discharged from the Army, meaning that they would be discharged and that they would essentially be disowned from the Army and from the United States. Roosevelt ends up signing the order discharging the 12 African American soldiers. However, it later comes out that the soldiers had been falsely accused, leading to more fingers pointed at racism. Wilson, one of the other progressive presidents in the later years, allowed matters of racism such as lynching to be dealt with on a state level, and in the South this is often not going to be dealt with appropriately. Another part of the progressive era movement was reforming the government. New models of government were hoping to get rid of the corruption that they were seeing in different cities with the political bosses. They tried to reorganize local governments that would prevent the corrupt mayors or political bosses and leading state officials. The state-level reforms mainly addressed political campaigns in which they were able to give out bribes or other sorts of incentives, and also corruption of transportation, civil service, meaning the spoil system, and taxation. At the federal level, progressives wanted to make the elections more fair and the politicians more accountable to voters. There was no way for the voters to really know what was going on unless they were paying attention in the newspaper. Also passed was the 17th Amendment, which gave the voters, rather than the state legislatures, the power to directly elect their U.S. senators. They also introduced three powerful tools during this time period: initiative, referendum, and recall. Initiative allowed citizens to propose new laws, while referendum allowed citizens to vote on new or existing laws, and recall allowed the voters now to remove an elected official from office. Under Taft, there's three major progressive presidents: Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson. Taft had worked to secure Roosevelt's progressive reforms rather than make his own. Under Taft, they also passed the 16th Amendment that granted Congress the power to levy taxes based on an individual's income. This was a way to pay for government programs more fairly. This is what we come to know today as the income tax. Taft lost a lot of the support of progressives while in office because he passed a lot of tariffs. He felt that tariffs were protecting U.S. industries, while progressives felt that tariffs were endangering the American consumer on a larger level. The Payne-Aldrich tariff increased taxes on businesses. Progressives really wanted low tariffs because they thought that it would protect the lower prices for consumer goods. During Taft's presidency, his secretary was also accused of impeding a federal fraud investigation of public coal dealings. Pinchot, one of the most famous conservative movement leaders, charged him with sabotage, and Taft had Pinchot fired, and he lost the support of Roosevelt, who really supported Pinchot in the conservative movement, in the conservation movement. Roosevelt campaigned for progressive Republicans who opposed Taft. He proposed a new program called New Nationalism that would protect workers, ensure public health, and regulate businesses. The Republican Party pretty badly fractured in supporting Taft and Roosevelt because they made the voters choose between the two of them. Roosevelt created his own political party in opposition to Taft called the Bull Moose Party. Democrats supported Woodrow Wilson, and he became the next president. Wilson's reform plan was called New Freedom, and it called for tariff reductions, banking reform, and stronger antitrust legislation. He essentially was trying to get rid of monopolies. Congress passed the Underwood Tariff Act in 1913 that would drastically reduce tariffs to their lowest levels in 50 years, going against exactly what Taft had done previously. He also introduced the graduated income tax. The graduated income tax essentially means that the rich people pay more and poor people pay less based on the percent of their income. Under Wilson, he also created the Federal Reserve Act. This was his banking reform. The Federal Reserve Act created a central fund from which banks could borrow to prevent collapse during a financial panic. They had just gotten out of the Panic of 1893, and Americans, that meant a lot to them. It also created the three-tier banking system. The Federal Reserve Board was over the Federal Reserve, and there was also 12 Federal Reserve banks in the different districts. And then over the Federal Reserve, under the Federal Reserve banks were private banks. These would be banks such as the Bank of America. This put the national banking system under the supervision of the federal government. Also, Wilson created this Clayton Antitrust Act that, again, would also make sure that trusts were outlawed. It clarified and extended the Sherman Antitrust Act that was passed during the Gilded Age, but was very, very vague. The Clayton Antitrust Act prohibited companies from buying the stock of competing companies in order to form a monopoly. It gave more teeth to the Sherman Antitrust Act. Wilson also created the Federal Trade Commission during this time period that enforced all of these antitrust laws, and that's really where the teeth came in. As you watch the video, make sure that you answer the guided questions provided. You may need to pause or rewatch the video in order to answer the guided questions. When the video ends, summarize the main points of the video in paragraph form, making sure that you use the specific vocabulary given to you on the WSQ sheet. These appeared as bolded and underlined words during the video. Then finish by asking one question, either a confusion question, a general question, or a discussion question. Thank you for joining me for this WSQ, and I'll see you in class.